Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Geo interview. Today, we are honored to host distinguished UN young leader for the SDGs from the Office of the Secretary General Envoy on Youth, New York. In a world grappling with urgent challenges to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, young leaders are stepping up to drive impactful and sustainable change. Through advocacy, engaging with the civic society, and digital innovation, they are shaping the solutions that matter. Joining us for this discussion are Ms. Hanyuan Wang. She's a climate tech entrepreneur, researcher, and founding member of Climind, and Anirban Dutta, a research analyst at the Center for Diplomacy and Innovation, the Geostrata. Let's dive into this conversation and explore the journeys, insights, and the role of youth in building better future. Let me start with Ms. Hanyuan first. Ms. Hanyuan, as a young person, you've been working with the UN and with your own ventures in making the world better, primarily to achieve the SDGs in a faster and in a better format. What do you think, in your opinion, is the role that young people are playing right now for this role?
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. First of all, it's my pleasure to be on this podcast. So beyond, I think beyond what I do at the Climind startup, it's really fortunate. It's a blast. For me and then the other 16 individuals, we've been selected as the 17 SDG young leaders by the United Nations, since 2 years ago. So this is a very special program by UN, like designed for the youth and also for the by the youth. So the Assistant Secretary General of the Youth Office right now, I believe he's the youngest senior management in UN. So I think my kind of track or my kind of pathway up to today is kind of like you work on your own project and also like you were given the chance to explore different parts of the world and contributing the SDG goals. So just to reply your question, I think it's um, like for me, it's a very unique journey since then. Like over the past 2 years, we were sent to, I think for me, it's more than 30 different engagement events, in person or online. And then it's also beyond climate change the scope, what I'm working on. But it's definitely not just for like travels or like joining events. I think for me, it's like you have the chance to navigate. Uh, the world is really big, and then on the other hand, like you as an individual is very small. But it doesn't mean like what you can do is small. So it also gave me a reflection on like where we're going, where we're moving to. Like when you either you're in a big company, whether you're at school or you have your own things, own projects to work on to fit into this reality today. Like we having very complex geopolitical situations and then like the nature disasters, all kinds of conflicts. So getting back to UN, I think me as a uh, outsider view, but also working closely with United Nations colleagues, and also having the chance to share our own work. Like it's surprising to me how transparent and then the entry barrier, like getting involved with events of UN is actually very low. So everyone should just follow their website, their Instagram, and there's so many programs. They welcome people from all over the world. Like just this April in New York City, there will be a EcoSo conference. So there's a conference for youth, and then technically speaking, like everyone can apply. So I think don't think you use yourself as too big or too small. Like the thing you can do is like the well, how say the potential is unlimited. But I think it's very important is to also navigate where you are, what's the timing are. And For me, my case is like we had the chance to bring AI technology into climate sector, and whether we are one of the first in the world to build large multimodal applications for climate data. So apparently it's very hard. Like you don't have many copy like firms you can copy from. But on the other hand, it's like we don't have that much burden. Like you have to be certain format to shift the to shape the product or to do your service for your clients. So I think that's also something advantage of the youth. Like they don't have the burden of the experience. So they're being creative and they're being innovative and then like being confident. Well, it's a very long answer, but I think for me, my journey with UN is quite dynamic. And then this past 2 years for me, it's also very fast beat learning. I met a lot of great people, human beings. So my cohorts, fellows of SDG Young Leader, and also the office of the youth office, um, and others, and including I think here we are. So yeah.
All right. Since you are focusing on the carbon market and climate risk, can you provide a roadmap of how youth-led civil society organizations can aim to address the challenges in climate-sensitive nations?
Yeah. Um, so my career in this sector started from I did a master program at Imperial College London. It's a climate finance. And then following up that, I end up being the research assistant in the Center of Climate Finance in Imperial. And I worked like a year and a half. And then I started Climind, and then we've been working on it for almost 2 years. So I've been part of different organizations like a think tank, education institution apparently, and then also the private sector. Um, well, my observation is like yeah, I don't have the number here, but I have a really high confidence. Like the ratio of the youth-led uh, climate-related organization, especially in the nonprofit sector, can be very high. So I think that's beyond motivation and stuff. It's also a sector to create more jobs. What I observe, like for example, I want to come back to China. The China's carbon market, the voluntary carbon market, was just opened a few years ago. Well, reopened a few years ago. The compliance market. So now the compliance carbon market. Sorry, I need to correct myself. So the compliance carbon market in China was like opened a few years ago. The voluntary one has been existing for a while. And so what you see is there's a clear gap. Like the job market need more analysts, need more people who knows about the carbon market and also or speak fluent English or maybe like know how the rules are in the sector. But the education sector is not really ready for that. I think like for the organization in the middle is a perfect fit to help to curate such a pool of talents. That's like a very straightforward, especially today. Like if you look at the job losing numbers, in many developed countries, it's historically high. So I think uh that's the angle to navigate. And then the second is um there are tremendous opportunities opening the doors for the youth, like in the climate sector. So in for example, like at Imperial, um, the center, like we were hosting this hackathon competition every year. And then you give the awards or prize to students giving a really good plan about the climate finance. It's a small check, but I think it's good enough to uh, attract more people to join. And also it's like a soft start. If anyone like me like want to do their own startup one day. So it's almost like a venture studio. And then so that's the second thing. I think there's so many opportunities for the youth can participate. They just need to fit into the big picture. And then the final one, um, well, I will give the credit to social media. Like I personally do a lot of campaigns with different organizations, things with the youth office as SDG Young Leader. But you also see the power of the new social media, how the information be conveyed in the super fast way. So we're not at a greater age. Like everyone knows, like Sweden, they have the greater, but now that everyone can have such a stage, you can just speak out. And but I think like that can be also be dangerous sometimes. Because like you see so many advocates, like sometimes it's hard to differentiate the quality of the information and then whether what's the actual uh well the motivation behind. So I think like for climate, especially if you go to COP, the climate conference every year, it's like a big party for climate people. So I think the ability to differentiate the quality information on social media is something essential for either individual organizations to be part of this journey. And that seems like a very easy, low entry barrier, but I think that's kind of like a very challenging skill to learn today. But you're gonna adapt.
I mean, you've highlighted a lot of things, and as going ahead, I would like to ask you more specifically about the role of Climind. But one of the things that I take from here is that, again, as a young person yourself, you've highlighted the role of social media that's playing right now in our world and the number of campaigns that can be run to sort of meet a causes. With that, I want to come to Mr. Anirban, and given the rise of digital diplomacy and decentralized activism that we are observing all around us, how do you see the role of youth-led organizations evolving in shaping the international development agendas beyond, let's just say, the traditional state-led efforts?
Uh, Pratyaksh, this particular question goes beyond practical as well as theoretical applications. When we see youth-led organizations as a whole, it makes forward that the developmental and international development agendas comes into the forefront. And this is an arena where the traditional state-led efforts are not very much seen. And sometimes it may seem that they are actually advancing state-led efforts, developmental efforts, where the state is not there. So what exactly are the opportunities that lies for the youth-led organizations are there especially with regard to digital diplomacy, they can participate in online campaigns. With regard to digital platforms as well, there are, with that regard, there will be a generation of policy discussions in a global level. If we see the case of campaigns like Fridays for Future, Black Lives Matter, over there, we can see that the youth activism are gradually coming forward without much of a direct settler-led intervention in that regard. Secondly, I will say that will be a rapid mobilization of youth across the borders, especially with the rise of internet connectivity, with the rise of electric connection. These are some of the things that we will be observing in the near future. And in the case of India, let's give an example. Around 95.15% of the villages are getting connected with the internet right now. And if we see the latest tally, that the total internet subscribers have increased from roughly from 200 million to around 900 million right now. So if we see this particular rate, obviously we will have to consider that without direct state-led efforts, digital diplomacy are likely going to flourish, whether with the support of the established international organizations or with regard to grassroots level organizations as well. And what we have exactly seen with regard to digital diplomacy, local entrepreneurship is also playing a very important role. And in our latest paper, we have come out from the Center for Environment and Climate Action from one of the pillars of the Geostrata. We have come up that local entrepreneurship remains a main important factor with regard to driving targeted policy actions. And in that regard, we will also have to see with the advent of AI, blockchain technologies, there will be a gradual development of projects as well as with regard to advancing state-led efforts. Especially what I want to say here is that youth-led diplomacy and cross-border coalition building and transnational youth-led networks flourishes in areas where the state is not there. So they are actually participating in the governance and not just they do not just removed from there. If we see the involvement of local youth-led NGOs and other international organizations, they are just playing the role of the state. If we see the cases of South Asian countries like Bangladesh, where we had previously seen NGOs were playing a very important role with regard to healthcare coverage, with regard to giving basic amenities, where we can see that the NGOs are playing a very important role. They are actually like taking the place of the state, because when the state is not there, NGOs and other international organizations grow up. So we can see that there is interlinkages with regard to traditional diplomacy as well. I will not take much of a time. With regard to that, we can see that this is gradually becoming a part and parcel of the local tradition. Whether if we see with regard to the education for girls, with regard to demand for the reproductive rights, these are all coming into the SDG implementation. So this is not only led by the state. SDG and Sustainable Developmental Goals may have been undertaken during the early 2000s, early 1990s as a state-led effort. But right now, this is not only a state-led. This is an arena where youth can participate and where the non-state actors can participate. So I'm not saying that the state is ceding the ground, but actually in South Asian nations and actually all the global South nations, we can see with the gradual participation that slowly and gradually youth-led organizations and NGOs are playing a very important role. I hope I answered that question correctly.
All right. So, you've highlighted how in a lot of nations, beyond the original or the traditional state-led efforts, the young people are expanding their base in terms of solving a lot of problems. And that brings me to Ms. Hanyuan again. And what I want to ask her that is that climate change significantly affects the individuals, right? On the flip side, it also becomes a hub for individuals like ourselves in bringing change and taking action. Under this context, can you explain to us that what role does climate specifically play in providing a better understanding of climate issues and what opportunities it brings for effective mitigation and adaptation measures?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I should actually bring this up earlier. So we are a AI platform providing users with accessible climate information knowledge. So put it the same way, it's designed beyond as a GPT for climate. Like now we're building different agents that you can do the workflow to do certain tasks. So for example, you have a green loan or sustainable link bound. So there's very complex procedures like paperwork, legislations like um, you need to like spend time on, but those are like very standard workflow in corporates. So that's like a one example, like how our solution product right now are helping our clients like the banks to do certain work. So this is like something we started almost 2 years ago. Like that was when OpenAI wasn't. I don't think it's launched yet, the ChatGPT, but we're sort of starting to explore the knowledge graph, and then the NLP, like how you can use those to streamline how you access information. So I had this very interesting conversation in Norway also with the current chair of IPCC, so Professor James Lee. He was a professor at Imperial College London. So we were both speaker at the forum. It's called the Oslo Energy Forum. So we had this conversation. Like I asked him about, okay, so we all know about IPCC, but it seems like very slow. Every time he launch a report. So how does it work? So he kindly walked me through the procedure, like how we produce a report, coordinating the 100 scientists globally working on climate. It's like a mission impossible, like, and it doesn't make sense for me, at least, like from the outsider view. But that's also like how the government organization work. Like in general, like it's hard to have one agreement for one topic. But my first reaction by then was at the time was it's like a perfect use case for tax AI. Like you can either build a search engine or you can either like streamline information, build different knowledge graph, making connection of concepts. So at least it can accelerate like how we develop climate science. So that's like a very naive like introduction how we very naive thought like how we started Climind. So and then like we I think it's also a good timing like comparing with 1 year ago, the cost for us to run the algorithm and then build our product is decreasing dramatically. So now we're like almost one out of 100, like the original price using the search like we built on top of the common model. So a little bit technical here. So we build the RAG, which is something allow us to retrieve the information and tell you what is the source of the answer the model gives you. So it at certain level it solves the solution the problem of hallucination. So that was something like it's stopping people to use GPT in the professional sector. Well, today like, we've been working with mostly companies because they are the biggest private drivers in the climate game beyond the government, NGO, and then also the public finance laws. So we have like insurance company, bank, asset manager, and then different types, and then we're also exploring like how diverse the sector is, what kind of work people are doing, and then the goal here, like you mentioned, is we need to increase the capital in the adaptation and mitigation, but how is the problem? So what at least like what I observed worked at the climate finance center was everything was too slow. It is still slow, and also because the policy is changing, the fluctuations in the sector is barely possible, I think, uh, to achieve the current climate goal. I hope like we can make some move to at least decrease people's time wasted in this sector, so they can spend the time on the really important matters. So that's like a natural of what we do, but also exploring in some other sector like education. So sustainability education and then climate education. It's I think the list goes on. So
All right. I think, the interesting way in which you've highlighted just the process of how an IPCC reports are formed, probably we would need to do another podcast with you wherein we talk about, your insights from that conversation. Now, I also like the fact that you mentioned the reference to ChatGPT because when I was exploring climate myself, I could understand that, oh, this is something that helps people, young people, or let's just say anyone in general, to sort of know about climate change from that perspective, right? That brings me to Anirban again. And given or following our conversation with Ms. Hanyuan, there is often a generational gap in policymaking. The youth voices are either sidelined or almost seen as disruptive, and Ms. Hanyuan might agree to that. So what I want to ask Anirban is that how can intergeneration collaboration be fostered in a way that ensures youth perspectives are not just heard, but actively shape policy?
So basically, I will start ahead with one of my experiences when I was traveling as a fellow, as a young one person in one of the Indian villages. Over there, what I saw over there here is that youth actions are sometimes considered to be disruptive in some regard. In that regard, we have to consider that as global South nations, as developing nations around the world, undertake immense difficulties with regard to developing their country, developing their economies, developing their infrastructure, and tackling day-to-day challenges with regard to changing climate. So therefore, in that sense, I have seen that there are a lot of youth which are coming from the villages, coming from the countryside, are actually helping to reconstruct, to contribute to the infrastructural system, participating in the local electoral regimes, local electoral institutions. And I saw over there they are actually taking some effort for changing the realities around them. So in that regard, what I saw, what I consider this is important here is that the system that we are currently in have to take into consideration the youth-led actions and youth-led interaction systems which are currently there. And there is needs to be a dialogue between as well as with the individuals in power. To develop a system where we can develop a participatory regime to make sure that we can undertake local developmental actions and consider youth-led efforts not as destructive but as contributing to the national interests and contributing to the local developmental models. So these are some of the pointers that I consider which will be a bit more important. And secondly, when I was driving youth-led efforts in many of the villages with regard to education, with regard to cultural integration, I saw there's a great deal of interest among people with regard to advancing their skills. Sometimes, in majority of the cases, because their hometowns and their villages cannot support themselves. Not in terms of educational system, they have to travel from one city to another. So in that regard, I think these are some of the challenges that that the youth can come forward to, not only to respond in a policy, not only for a policy intervention, but also for to drive a state-led action system, like dedicated to the local areas, to make sure that these developmental challenges are undertaken. Secondly, there are also, with regard to that, there are also with the vast challenges with regard to climate change and how it is affecting it's affecting the villages from the global south nations. In majority of the areas that I've visited, especially during the Kharif and Zaid season, um, the production systems are collapsing. Production systems is reducing because the climate change and the heat wave systems that is prevalent across the country. Most of them are reducing their productivity. So what is happening here is that it is taking a direct shot on their income systems. So therefore, what we can do, and what we as a think tank, as an think tank can do to make sure that we can drive the government, as well as to drive the policy making bodies to respond to such systems, and to take youth-led actions to respond to such challenges which are there. I mean, by this I mean not only on a policy level, but also by mobilizing the city youth and as well as mobilizing the educated youth to respond to such challenges, not only in a policy level, but also to take actions on the ground, to be in commentary with the organizations in the grassroots level.
All right. That brings me to a last question, which is for Ms. Hanyuan, and that goes as that you've worked in Bangladesh, right? And what role do you think organizations like Climind play in bringing the government decision makers and the other relevant stakeholders in scientifically addressing the challenges of climate change in, let's just say, sea level rise in the most vulnerable places? What would you say on that?
Um, well, I was actually participating in this project at the Imperial. Like we're doing project research on the nature finance. So the types of the financing source for nature. And then in Southeast Asia, for example, so like mangrove or other type of finance. And then the limited information I remember was and in general, like there are public, private, blended finance, they type. So under each, like you have different instruments, like the financial institution is giving. And it's a sector, it's not really popular, but it's super important because um like for nature production, the size of the funding and then the urgency of the projects, it's not attractive portfolio from no matter from which dimension. So if you want to attract more private capital into the sector, in one way is you lower the cost of fundraising, or you lower the cost of financing. And then the second is you kind of like learning from the insurance perspective, like how you can bring more people in the race, and then like increasing the potentials they can even gain the return. But it can be other return, like the beneficials. So what I'm trying to say is, it's even a new concept for the climate finance sector. So for example, we did a research study on the case study on the sustainable link bond, like how they use micro financing to curate these projects working on mangrove in, I think it's in Bangladesh or another country nearby. And think for us, so for now today, if we go to Climind, we research, okay, I want to find 10 case study of the climate project in Bangladesh happened in past 2 years. Like we can very accurately give you the example with the source. So at least I think that saves a lot of cost for people diving into the sector initially. So you don't need to like go to Google or even like ChatGPT. So we did a comparison, the benchmark. The quality of information like we give is much higher than any type of common model today in the market. So for me, like I think information is the key for any strategy planning. Um, like you spend a lot of time to evaluate your plan until like you execute it, because each of them is like such a huge project. So there's the cost, the risk of losing money is like nobody can bear. So And also usually for the nature projects, it can go very long. So it adds the unpredictability, unpredictable results. Like to that's also part of the reason like private sector is a bit reluctant to I think to participate. You can name I think unlimited reasons like why it's not like a very popular product in the financial sector right now. But I think the key thing here is like how we can give more supply on the professionals in the sector. Like in the future, they can contribute either local or globally. And then never to say, I think Southeast Asia is where the most needs of demand of adaptation mitigation, but which also like who suffered the most from the greenhouse gas increase in the past decades. So I think that's also the dynamic here, like why it's so important today.
All right. All right. You know, that was a great response. And one of the things that, again, you've highlighted is that just how important information, or rather, I should say, quality information is key to, to all of these ventures. With that, I want to thank you for this panel discussion, this podcast, and talking to us on such an important issue. And as we wrap up this insightful yet short conversation, one thing is clear, which is that young leaders are not just the future, they're very much the present, actively shaping a more sustainable and inclusive world. This has been the Geo interview. Until next time, let's stay inspired and keep making an impact. Thank you so much to everyone for joining this discussion.
That's just my thank you.
Pleasure's mine.